Right. Nice to see you, Sophia. Nice to see you, Jeff. We're on Mary part. Is it part 4 or part 5? I've lost count now. Part 4. Where we last time we were looking at the unrighteous powers, and Sophia's going to take us further into the journey and start looking at these spirits of wrath.
Yes. Thank you, Angus. So we actually spent quite a while talking last time about the first unrighteous power, darkness, which is actually missing from the text. But scholars and theologists, not saying that they're separate, but specialists in looking at these texts have been able to triangulate with other Gnostic texts, other sources, to really discern what is meant by the principality of darkness. And we were really talking last time about thinking about it as almost a metaphysics. So it's the big story, as Mark Vernon might call it, that underpins, that presupposes the rest of reality. And it's really a choice as to, do we determine that? I mean, I'm not saying this is dualistic, but generally in the biblical texts, we either believe that reality is material, or we believe that it is infinite. And so most biblical texts will sort of talk about that. Do we decide that we're going to connect with the transcendent or the physical realm? So I would probably propose that the darkness there is the first step. So it's basically saying, is our reality the material world, or is it something else? And you can see in the real life situation that we find ourselves today, the secular world, the world of enlightenment and science, that that really our firmament around the tree of life, the picture there, is material. There is no such thing as something beyond material. There's no such thing as a transcendent. So I would probably propose that is quite a nifty way of thinking about the principality of darkness, because it then sets the course for the rest of the powers, the unrighteous powers.
Can I ask a question, Sophia?
Sure.
The number 4, does that, in the way you're thinking, does that have any significance, or does it map onto any other systems of thinking that is like interesting in this context?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, the first one that springs to mind are the 4 horsemen in the book of Revelation, and very similar to the Gospel of Mary. The final one, which is the pale horse, the horse of death, Thanatos, actually uses the first three powers as weapons for death, and that is actually exactly the same as the Gospel of Mary, except we've got 7 wraths, 7 ways of dying or killing, as opposed to in the book of Revelation it's the 3. So I'd probably say that was almost a direct copy. But I would also say that you tend to find that, so if we looked at something like Dante's Inferno, so when Virgil and Dante, or when Dante walks up the mountain, he comes across 3 beasts, and the 3 like sins, and essentially he has to go back into the woods and meet Virgil, and then go down into the underworld. And I would actually say that in that case, that darkness is kind of the realm it's like the bigger realm within which those beasts operate. So he's actually made mistakes and sins because of the darkness. So it's kind of implied. Whereas here and also in the Revelation, it's well, actually in the Revelation it's not darkness. The first horse isn't darkness, but here it's actually called out as the first one. So if you miss, so this is actually a journey through these principalities, and so if you miss on the first one, you're destined to the second one. So it's actually a cosmology. It's sort of a process that's followed. So I'd say that you could actually argue that those three beasts still can fit into this picture. It's just that darkness is the realm within which this is happening, and it's called out as a separate beast in Magdalene. What were your thoughts, Angus?
Yeah, as Jeff hinted at last time, I think when I see the number 4, it's like being versed for a long time in anthroposophy. It's like one of the first thoughts that comes to mind is it's like the 4 constituent parts of what a human being is: ego, astral body, etheric body, and physical body. And at least in my mind, it'd be interesting to see what Jeff says here. But I actually also see an interesting mapping going on. So the unrighteous powers are those powers which don't allow Christ to work in that being. So if Christ doesn't work in the ego, you have darkness. If Christ isn't working in the ego being, then predominantly Lucifer is working in the astral body, because the light of the ego is not it's not conscious of itself through the Christ powers, and therefore it doesn't illuminate or bring consciousness to the astral realm. It doesn't clear up, it doesn't purify this astral realm. And so this link with desires is particularly striking there. And the how can I say this? It continues to be convincing, because if the next body, it's like in anthroposophical thought, is obviously the etheric body, and this is the realm that Ahriman can corrupt. He's needed the help of Lucifer. It also assumes that Christ isn't working in spreading the light of consciousness into the body. But the long-term effects of cravings and desires on the etheric body are a slow weakening of the etheric forces, or the life-supporting forces of the organism. But many times Steiner talks about, I actually made some notes on this, I might see if I can find them as I'm talking, but how lies, etheric body is the seat of thinking. It's where, that's also a complicated question that I won't try to unpack, but it's like thinking, but incorrect thinking, lies, are also seated in the etheric body, and they can live there for longer. So that mapping with ignorance, Ahrimanic, and this tendency for a corruption of a system leads to lies within the system continues. And then finally, if you've got a totally corrupted astral body, desire body, if you've got a sickened, a weakened etheric body through ignorance and disharmony, then ultimately that leads to the actual destruction of life itself. And in Steiner, in Steiner world, this becomes actually the third force of evil, the Asuras, which is actually the destruction, not just the undermining of the physical forces that make up the body, but I think of we talk about this term, the phantom, which is grossly simplified, the blueprint of the physical body, which is then sort of like filled with the etheric forces. But the Asuras, they are those most evil of beings, or the most powerful of beings, that are actually capable of actually, it's like getting a big rubber on the blueprint and say, right, you're not going to have a heart anymore, or something like that, which means so the destruction of the vehicle of the soul and spirit. So it was really interesting to see those words used there, and being able to map it onto that. What did you think, Jeff?
That was pretty complete. Well, let me take a slightly different tack as relates to the four, and then I want to relate it to Mary's conversation with the Christ, and the Christ answers the question, where do I find in my soul this vision, so to speak, and is it in the spirit, or is it in the soul? And he says it's in the place in between. And so I want to just focus on the place in between, which is I consciousness, say. So it's not yet. It's that which is evolving through time, and I would say the phantom is the ground by which we reconnect every time we revisit this life on Earth. So it's the vessel through which we find ourselves again, say, something like that. The ground, that the power, that the energy of the I finds again. And this I consciousness is evolving into an independent being. And so that independent being has a soul, and that soul is neither of the physical world or the spiritual world at first, let's say. And so the soul phenomenologically is made up of its connection with the physical body, which would be darkness, its connection with the sentient aspect, which would be out of which desire arises, the impulse to be human, say, like we've been talking about in our philosophy of freedom conversations, is at the foundation of what it is to be an evolving human being, right? But if your desire is co-opted by forces that look to disalign you with freedom, with that, then your impulses will be turned into desire would be turned into something that you become ashamed of, say, or that you don't even have control over, and so it affirms, they say, sort of blind unconscious that our modern day psychology has bought into, coming out of the phenomenologists of the 19th century, say, like von Hartmann, and then Freud and Jung, of course. Then the intellectual soul is the third aspect of the soul body that is independent, both of the physical and of the spirit, and it's up. These soul configurations are up for grabs, right? Because either we're meant to be free within them and create this sort of second self that we're meant to spiritualize, or it is hijacked, say. So a good way to hijack also is to turn the intellectual soul from being independent into some sort of groupthink mentality, one that follows along lockstep with authoritarian configurations, whether that's public opinion or giving over to authoritarian dystopian leaders, and then the consciousness soul is where we're actually living in death, where we are aware of the valley of shadows that we live in the human, say, brain, that our thinking, as Angus mentioned, our thinking is essentially an etheric activity, but it becomes unavailable to us for a moment, and then death becomes darkness instead of a portal that we can ultimately be free in reconceiving ourselves, or resurrecting ourselves. So the resurrective power is sought to, at this point, let's say, is hijacked from being something that the individual agency can achieve, and it's only through individual agency that the resurrective power can work. It can't happen through some group salvation that happens because of some sort of religion. And so I think we see the artifacts of that in people, in our culture, with all of the religious fervor around political ideologies and around scientific ideologies, and just the general condition that there's no such thing as a soul, and all of these notions. So I take us just that sort of parallel to the spiritually described iterations that Angus brings with that which is potentially spiritualizable as the independent soul in a fourfold way. And both of those things are true, I think. There are all sorts of ways in which they are the interpenetrating, say, and then I think the seven I see as many different things, but as relates to what I'm saying now, is probably the 7 life processes that medical science outlines, but that Steiner outlines as a part of this what's up for grabs, say.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff and Angus. I mean, you've probably gathered from the Gospel of Mary that that's really concordant and conciliant with what you're saying. So the darkness would definitely be the I consciousness. So are we oriented such that no light can come in at all, and or are we oriented to the all, to infinity? Is the first question, because then all the rest flows. And I think that's really that's absolutely spot on. That I'd say that seems to me to be quite a really conciliant mapping with what's in the Gospel of Mary. Also, your question, your points there around desire and the fact that things are being hijacked, and that also they're being shamed, really comes through in this. You'll see later on where the powers are actually shaming soul, saying you're lying to us, you're judging us. They're projecting onto soul, and there's that kind of shame that soul's meant to feel for doing what they're doing, for doing what it's doing. Sorry. So that really does come through. Also, if you recollect, before we talked about righteous desire and unrighteous desire. So the righteous desire is the desire to find unity and to find the whole, and to make the soul the same as the true self, so that they can all dissolve back into the root. That was really the first sort of discussion that we had. And this now is talking about unrighteous desire. So it's saying desire in itself is actually necessary. It's an impulse that we have, but it's what it's oriented to. Is it oriented to the finite or the infinite? So it's very it definitely agrees with those sentiments that come through in Steiner. And Steiner wouldn't have read this, would he? Because they didn't find it.
They hadn't found it then. But yeah, I mean, he does talk about Gnostic texts and the problems of reading anything about Gnosticism, because anything that was surviving at the time that he was alive was written by its enemies.
The other thing is, so I'm, as you know, obsessed about Mark Vernon in a healthy way. And so I've got page 116 of my secret, was it the Secret of Christianity, which I love. But he's also got one podcast that I've listened to probably about 40 times and counting, which is The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. William Blake.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's all in there. And it's every proverb of hell, you read it and it's boom, boom, boom. And in that it's really recanting this and Steiner. And so I think the thing is it's a pattern that's in the cosmos, isn't it? And it doesn't matter who's picked it up. It's there. You can't deny it, and it's in everything.
And once you've identified it, this is the real beauty, isn't it? Once you've identified it once, it becomes so easy to recognize it in multiple other instances, other authors, other traditions, other cultures. It's like, yeah, I'm beginning. It's a little bit like Aldous Huxley's idea of the perennial philosophy. It's like that's behind there are truths that describe the world, and if we really look at the different traditions, multiple religious traditions, we all see hints of this same underlying reality, i.e., we are body and psycho-spiritual beings. And anybody who believes anything else, we understand why they're confused about it. But for those people that aren't confused about it, there's a wealth of literature out there that goes back thousands of years describing man's relationship with the divine.
Yeah.
And the divine that is not, let's say, friendly to the human project. So you start to see the holistic picture just start to disappear in Western culture. With, say, Milton's Paradise Lost, which is a one-sided picture of evil, and Faust's Mephistopheles is the other side of it. Neither of them contain both. And the importance of keeping your eye on both, or the importance of meaning, but both without the asuras, right? So if we don't have the redemptive relationship with these powers, which are forces in the world, they're not in and of themselves. They're not, say, they're innocuous. You have to give them power in the sense of going along with them in a one-sided way. But they need to be held as in the center, which is why the human soul is the project, because it's the center that becomes the Christ consciousness, and it's not going to happen without every individual taking this up as a path, and so we've described the ways in which that's discouraged through education and through all of the institutional life, but remembering the ways in which these powers are operating in our life. So, I would say my interpretation of this from the soul life is that Lucifer is the Luciferic side of this is plays out as sympathy in the soul, and the Ahrimanic plays the sort of antipathetic role, which doesn't mean just like reactionary. It also just means um, um, keeping things in a brain-bound intellect, analytic, tearing things apart, without any higher synthesis happening. There's no the importance of sympathy and antipathy being in a dialectical relationship, say, is something that is a powerful way to you know freely move along in your carriage, say. Angus, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I'd really like to come in there because I found my notes and you've led the way. So one of the things I've been doing this week is I've been trying to get Steiner's picture on how Lucifer works in the thinking, feeling, willing life, and how Ahriman works in the thinking, feeling, willing life. And I'm going to just present them as like a complement to what you were saying there. So if we're looking as it's like in our thinking life, what is, according to Steiner, the effect of the Luciferic forces, the chaotic, irrational, egocentric, and personal desires. Obviously, getting close to a feeling there, but this that typifies a thinking inspired by Lucifer. If thinking is inspired by Ahriman, we would use words like cold, rational, measurable, isolation, and disconnection. And as we can hear in those words, in their one-sidedness, they are dangerous. But we actually sometimes we do need to be disconnected, and sometimes we do need to be egocentric. Sometimes chaos is what is actually needed to create something new. And so they aren't people of I think many people think of evils as being absolute evils, but when we read about them in this context, it's reimagining these real active forces in our thinking life that add a dimension to our thinking life, which can be of service in certain situations. But we've got to be the ones that decide. It's like infra consciousness. Is it time to be cold and rational, or is it actually time to be irrational, spontaneous, and even egocentric? On the feeling life, he would map words, and these are words that he's actually used. I haven't pulled them out of the bag. In the feeling life, how does Lucifer work? Seen as emotionalism, impulsiveness, and lack of self-awareness, which again could perhaps go back to thinking. I mean, they do tend to bleed one into the other, which is inevitable. They live in our inner lives. So what about Ahriman? Numbness, detachment, and no empathy is what's going on in Ahriman. And then finally, though, the will was I thought it was interesting. There was a couple of ones that I found difficult to reconcile with another aspect of Stein's thinking, but I'll give the list anyway. So Lucifer is identified in the will life with willfulness, lack of self-control, personal pleasure at the expense of others. Whereas Ahriman is correlated to no motivation, no initiative taking, apathy, and indifference. And I think it is the one that's actually struck me there was the willfulness, because one of the things that I've also been looking into quite a bit recently is this idea of the double and the way the double actually works in us. One of the, apart from the intelligence characteristic, highly Ahrimanic, we've got this willfulness aspect. I saw the double as being just Ahrimanic, but when this word willfulness was added by Steiner onto the Luciferic side, it was is the double like a combination of these two, two evil brothers working together? Anyway, added a little bit of context to what you were saying there, Jeff.
And Angus, I just had a question as well. So the thinking, feeling, willing of Lucifer and Ahriman, but what about Azurus?
So there's very little on the Azurus there, and I think as Jeff was hinting at, that the fruit of the Azurus is the destruction, but the destruction can't come about unless Lucifer has destroyed and Ahriman has destroyed. The Azurus can't work unless his underlings have done their work. And Steiner is also clear about this. He says that it's like Ahriman could never have sort of like had any impact on the spiritual life of mankind several thousand years ago, because the spiritual life was still a real observable phenomena for them. You couldn't go around. It's like me trying to convince you that these headphones don't exist. I'm sorry, my senses say they do. I don't care what your theory says. I know they do. But so Azurus is one of those areas that's talked about a lot less as being a force that works within the human soul. That's it'd be interesting to hear what Jeff says of that. It's very much talked about as this ultimate destructive power, but a lot less on how it actually works, although perhaps a slight connection with the Antichrist might actually be there, but I would have to go away and do my homework on that to say more about it.
Yeah. I think more than slight. So, as I understand this from a phenomenological standpoint, as well as being a good Steiner student, the powers that we've been speaking about, the polarity, when one-sidedness is allowed to run away with the human soul, so to speak, it creates a Christ-shaped hole, and the Azurus are meant to fill that hole. So they are the Azurus. You don't speak of an Azuric being. You do speak of an Ahrimanic being and a Luciferic being, and even the suggestion is that Lucifer incarnated in a human body at a certain point in evolution. This is not something I experience or have witnessed in some spiritual realm myself, but it's a very helpful way of looking at it. And then the Ahrimanic being is said to be coming into incarnation in our time, and it looks a lot like AI to me. I'm not saying it is AI, but certainly there's a vessel being created for that being to enter as a seeming human being, maybe. And then the Azurus are meant to dwell in every single individual, as the Christ is meant to dwell in every single individual, except that it would be an involuntary, as opposed to freedom being the way in which, spiritual autonomy being the way in which the Christ consciousness works as the center that holds the polarity creatively, and creates and spiritualizes this I consciousness that is arising, that is an amalgam, I think, of influences from Lucifer and Ahriman, but is not Lucifer and Ahriman, is a free actor in relationship to them and redeems them, right? And so then that allows the Christ to enter. But if the one-sidedness prevails, then the Azurus enter the human frame, and permanent death is what occurs. In other words, the earth is entombed, and a spiritual birth at death never occurs again. So it stops the reincarnative process, say, and the process of the spiritualization of the earth is say stolen from the purposeful arc of existence.
It's interesting because Angus and I were having a chat through the week, and I remember there was one place where Steiner talks about being aware that your body is being emptied, and what could fill that emptiness. Certainly, I think, like he talks about the use of metals, for instance, in disconnecting the bodies, and that disconnection creates holes and spaces, that all of the bodies need to be put together, and the impulses working together. But I can't remember exactly, Angus, I don't know if you can, around his caution about our bodies being emptied.
So I'm blanking a little bit, but I did actually have a chance to just quickly look for something specifically to your question about the zeros. This might help you to find it. But he describes these zeros as powerful spiritual beings who seek to exert their influence on human consciousness in order to gain control over it. Not much different from Aaron and Lucifer there. But he noted they do this by stirring up our passions and desires, leading us to become overly attached to material things. And this is perhaps where my thinking it goes. It's taking the worst aspects of Luciferic thinking, feeling, and willing, and taking the unhealthiest, worst aspects of Aramanic being to create the destruction of the body itself. So instead of being one-sidedly Luciferic, which will still keep you connected with the to a certain extent with the spiritual world, or one-sidedly Aramanic, which grounds you in your sense of self and existence. So I continue to exist as an individual being. No, we get this the destruction of everything, of what it means to be a human being, when these two polarities and beginning to get a Hegelian pictures, like a sublimation of the two into something even more evil, managing to combine both opposites into a whole. And in that sense, like Jeff was saying, Antichrist, the destruction of the impulse of love to transform the planet Earth, the mission of the Earth.
So if we were to look at the Gospel of Mary here, and particularly this second power, which is desire. So we were mentioning before about Blake, etc., Dante, whoever it is, talking about the infinite versus the material. So a desire for the material versus a desire to meet with the infinite. And I'm just wondering, so I can see we're talking here about a Luciferic type of desire, but there's also an Aramanic type of desire as well. And I'm just wondering how we can discern which part of Luciferic is desiring the material, and which part is the Aramanic desire that's desiring the material. Can we actually differentiate between the two?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, no question about it. The Luciferic looks to become a god, so to speak. Looks to become permanent. Looks to become. Looks to have. Looks like greed. Looks like a possession of everything for one's self. In the Aramanic, looks like security, permanence of a system and state, state of mind, state of world. Everything should be ordered in perfect repeatability, and everything should be the same, sameness, where the impulse in the Luciferic is to individuate, to become, have my own style, my own, all these things that are wonderful aspects of persona building go into this one-sidedness, right? And then you become what? Insecure, because everything is superficial. And who comes in to clamp down on your insecurities? Ehrman comes for the security. So it's like, but if you just belong to this group, then you'll be safe. Then and everybody looks like you and talks like you and uses the same language as you. So I would say that's one way to talk about the allure of the physical.
It really sings to me of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, actually. So I think he there characterizes man in a certain way as wanting to progress, like his individual wealth, but also wanting to protect what he's already got. And I can see those two features there. The Azuric, though, is an interesting one. So, like I see, if we look at today's society, I'd say that the majority don't think that they're gods. They're probably shit scared, and they're probably more Aramanic, like order, security. I'm thinking about technocracy. There's a few that believe they're gods and they're creating the technocracy that then the zombies and so forth are maintaining and progressing. And then there's this other element, isn't there, of because of that paradigm of finite, that there's a sort of resentment then. So I want to grow, I want to protect, but I also don't want anyone else to have anything either. And so I'm going to have to take off other people and destroy them, such that I can continue to progress. So you could almost see Azurus playing out there as well, potentially. And it's inevitable that that's what's going to happen. I'm a god to start off with. I want to protect my stuff. And then I want to progress further. And the only way that I can do that in the finite world is to get rid of other people. So it's that kind of unipolar zero-sum type.
But the good gods, they've got a trump card in this, I think. So the spiritual world that is wants Earth to become the planet on which, like, the mission of love is like brought to full fruition in the spirit of Christ, that somebody who's excessively luciferic will have specific types of illnesses that it'll create an imbalance in that person. And actually, it's the Aramanic aspects of the world that are likely to force it to wake up to its one-sidedness. Like if it's one-sidedly luciferic, actually the world around it, it's like community materialism and so like pressure and all these type of things that Luciferians hate. Society is like continually saying, we're here. And so this being that might be exceedingly luciferic in this sense is challenged the whole time, and mental health will be it's the key area where we see this. So like when we see people So I hear I'm making these like huge generalizations, but still taken out of Steiner's work. I believe it's like the more that we see mental health issues, neurological issues, so like affecting society and individuals within that society, we can talk in terms of these are like luciferic forces, so like manifesting, and that actually aromatic forces can like help create like a movement towards the center. And the opposite is true on the other side. It's like the illness of like the physical body, all the physical ailments that we have that are not caused by like breaks of bones or broken cartilages, or it's like the actual physical, but the life processes that live in us, the functioning of the heart, the functioning of the liver, all of these type of things. These are all diseases that are created by our man living in us, and they also have their own like specific dynamic in that a person is going to have to like find a way of coming to terms with his or her own unique problems, which is going to require them to, instead of being an apathetic, non-initiative taking person, if they don't want to just die on a bed, they're going to have to start making changes to their lives. They're going to have to, it's like, not just follow the will of the community. They can't, they have to recognize that cold rational thinking here might not actually be what's required. I've got to start to be impulsive and listen to voices that I wouldn't. It's like voices of information I'm talking about here, who I might not normally listen to, who's like fall out of my normal information bubble. So in this sense, those two forces, it's like an excess of one. It's like it's likely to bring into being, create the necessity for its counterforce to be born within us, or to be used by with us, and that's what I mean. The image of three crosses on Golgotha. One way of interpreting that is exactly Christ is the balancing force between these. There is a way of having a healthy resolution of these soul forces that live in all of us. Yeah.
And actually, Blake says in his Marriage of Heaven and Hell that to find the infinite, you can actually follow your desire of the finite to its very depths. And it's in the depths that you'll find the infinite. And I can see that echoed in what you're saying, Angus.
Yeah. It's like the two paths of initiation, like into the microcosm and out into the macrocosm.
Yeah.
Without forsaking the temporal I that lives between the two. Otherwise, you're just a dissolute soul on one side and an entombed one on the other side. I think of people also, as Angus was speaking, people I know, particularly, I have to say, I know, that are possessed by egoism, and egoism possession is the shadow side already of the Christ impulse within an individual. So that egoism is driving people toward never wanting to be sick, so that there's never a resolution of these problems. So that and so what do we see this in transhumanism, right? As a general thing that people are going for. Like we're not. It's no longer science fiction. It's becoming more and more possible to become transhuman, and it's not transcendently human. it's subhuman, and it creates a vessel for the Azuras, I would say. So but in the real time, you think of CEOs who are sociopaths, essentially, right? They're allowed to run within an organization, and the organization itself is. I was listening to Daniel Schmachtenberger and Liv Boeree, I think, and they were talking about Moloch And it's really Araman that they're talking about, or it's a one-sided picture of evil, say, that is the system as a being. Well, I mean, okay, well there you are. So they I haven't gotten into the last part of it, which is the artificial intelligence part of the conversation, which will be interesting as relates to Moloch. But that this is in the air, right, is interesting. That's an aside. I want to stick with the egoist, because the egoist now, it's and we have this in philosophy of freedom. There's these two trains of the human soul paths, two paths toward freedom. One is the driving force, that which is driving you to the impulse, say, and the other is motive, in the way we collect motives. So one could be called desire, and the other could be called ignorance in the negative sense. But the egoist is in complete capture, is completely possessed by not being sick, never to die, like eternal youthfulness, to then also get what he wants, to spite sometimes, and in spite of anything or everybody in their way, and everything is an offense to them that gives them energy to continue on that path. And I would say, in what I was thinking about when Angus was speaking, so this is a very personal experience for me, but I was thinking more and more that behavior is going to look more and more inappropriate to people. And so that is, in a sense, that's a sickness in and of itself. It's a sociopathology or a psychopathology that never does fall into the illnesses that you're describing, because it's able to, through whatever medicalization, through just sheer stubbornness and will, to resist the things that will create the revolution in the soul that needs to occur.
Okay, so desire there then. So I think we're saying there's the luciferic, the aromatic, but there seems to be this third type as well, which is between the two. Is that what you're saying, Jeff?
A culmination of the two, more rather than. Sorry, I'm taking you asked Jeff there. Sorry.
No, I think you were speaking my mind there a little bit. I think it's the Christ is meant to be the redemption of the two, so that they are they're turned into the spiritualized being that really they desire as well, but can't help themselves, right? Because they're not free. They're not free to be to integrate each other, right? They're not free to be in free relationship, and that makes room for this Christ-shaped whole that is the third power that you're describing of the Asuras, and then death is the result, which is a permanent transhumanist dystopia, right? Is that death is permanent, and that means the earth is no longer permeable with the spiritual cosmos, right? With the whole, and so only individuation is occurring, but not real individuation into the Holy Spirit. It's particleization, atomization, as the impulse that's the earth. I mean, when we're born, we're dying. The earth's forces are particleizing, and the good part of that is that we can ride that wave into an individual spiritualized physical body, and that's what the Christ did, and that's what the Christ is showing the way for.
I just thought I'd share this as well. what do the Zeros hate most, or what's an antidote to them? We can gain strength from the spiritual world by cultivating a deep reverence for the divine. So, how do we identify people being gradually taken over by Azuric powers? They are haters of reverence, haters of people who are able to see value in life and in traditions. And I think it's interesting because what is reverence? Reverence is love. It's love. It's recognizing the value of things that are other than myself, and that this is that which the Azuras hate most. It's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? If we and obviously it shouldn't surprise us. This is the polar opposite of what Christ is telling us, because Christ is telling us that is the only thing we do in life. We love God, we love the world, we love our neighbors, we love our enemies, and the Azuras can't be having anything of that. That's yeah.
So the first step is to have spiritual understanding, as mentioned earlier in this gospel, because that's where health comes from, and it's spiritual understanding in the mind between soul and spirit, and the understanding is the know thyself of what the four is. And so then Christ gives the path. It's just like a sevenfold path here, almost, right? The seven spirits of wrath. What is the soul confront in relationship to it, and how does it overcome it? And so this is the beauty of this text that is nowhere else in any of the Gospels that or any other religious text I've ever seen. Maybe the eightfold Buddhist path, say, something like that. But I'm interested in really diving into the spirits of wrath, because they're my little buddies.
And that's really, I think what we're saying, that's the more Azuric type elements.
Yes, because it's looking to inhabit the human body in a permanent way. So to take over the life processes, where we are meant to take over the life processes as cognitive perceptual organs, right? That and it's our heritage. In another place, Steiner refers to the seven life processes as that which were senses at another time, right? But now they need to, through this resurrective process, through this vessel that we are co-creators of, say, through karma and reincarnation, and then through spiritual autonomy, through a spiritual path on this earth. We're meant to incarnate. We're not meant to excarnate. We're meant to be continually incarnating to do the work of spiritualizing the physical body, and it's through the seven that we do that. And the way through the seven is through the soul. It's the spiritualization of the soul. The way to the Father is through me.
Yeah. Well, it's the throne, isn't it? We talked last time about vessels like thrones or vessels of mercy, and the soul is one, and then the physical body, and then our techne, and so forth. And the whole point of salvation is that we can then become an antenna for mercy, God's mercy into the world, and spread it.
Yes, yes, and we don't rest until it is available for all of humanity. Say, we don't stop reincarnating until we're able to be that vessel. It's a collective intelligence, not a collective ignorance, which is what we've adopted recently.
Yes. And I've really been engaging with Owen Barfield's final participation, reciprocal participation. And I really see he's very modest about like trying to define it, and he's almost saying, I can't really define it because we're not there yet. But I almost see in this discussion that there is going to be a shift in consciousness where we start to become reciprocally participative. And it's the participation that brings the elements together, isn't it? That creates a space for mercy to flow through. And I think it's participating with each other, but also with the divine as well. And I really do. I'm starting to see that these vessels are actually co-created. So, and I think that's kind of what Barfield was trying to get to, wasn't it? With this new evolution of consciousness. Sorry, Jeff, were you going to say something?
No, I was looking forward to moving into the 7 spirits of wrath.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so did we want to just basically skip through the unrighteous powers? So there's some text there on desire, and essentially what's happened is that the soul has consumed desire and has become a skin, a garment, or for desire. I think some of the interesting things here is that desire actually can't see. And I think we get this with Azurus and Ahriman and Lucifer as well, that they're sort of stuck in particular realms. And so the soul's able to sort of move around. And so they're going, where are you going? What are you? Like, we don't understand what's going on. And like in Ian McGilchrist, he's got in The Matter of Things this amazing myth, Iroquois myth, and it's the 2 brothers, and there's one called Flint, and Flint comes to the earth and he can only see the present. He can't see the future or the past. He can't see any continuation. And I really see this in those forces that we've been talking about from Steiner's point of view, but also here, that desire doesn't see everything, whereas soul can, because soul can participate with mercy, can actually step into universal consciousness and look in from there.
It was
desire can't.
that Iroquois myth that you're talking about, that you sent me so that I could read it. It was really, really, really interesting how this idea that flows through the whole. It's a short myth, but the whole myth is you've got a good force and a bad force, but the bad force is allowed to have its way for a while, but then the good force learns to say, okay, you've created something new here. It's not quite what I would have done. It's not what I would have expected, but yeah, we can use that as well. And every different mutation of this, the evil brother, eventually ends up serving the good. And I can't help thinking about the line, Goethe's line from Faust, that which eternally seeks to do evil, but it ends up doing good. It's like so deeply in that myth there. Really, really beautiful. It's such a simple story, but so profound at the same time.
I like this way that we just kind of tripped upon, which is that these powers can't help themselves. They're in their lane. They're doing their job. Right?
Yeah.
And here, this first communication is gaslighting. Right? It's like, I did not see you descending, but now I see you ascending. Why do you lie? Right? Like, that is Ahrimanic shit right there. Like, why do you lie? It's like using deception as the deceptor, right? To get you to believe that you are like him, right? You're trying to pull down the right. And the soul answered, "I saw you. You did not see me or recognize me. You don't know who the fuck I am. I served you as a garment, and you did not know me. Like I gave you a sense of humanness, and you don't recognize it, right? So you aren't destined to ascend, because your descent is permanent. So
and soul is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say soul has seen that through the light of understanding, the space between.
Yes, that's the purification of the astral body, you could say. It's that
Yeah, and it's almost as soon as you've seen it, that's it. You're transformed. And there's a scene in Mary Magdalene, but it's in the Bible, where Jesus goes into the temple and turns over all of the money changers' tables, and he's like, cast thee out and all the rest of it. And you can see he's not scared at all. He just doesn't give a shit, and he doesn't care about the emperor or any of that stuff, or the soldiers or anything. And Mark Vernon sort of says, well, it's because it's not real. Like the eternal internal kingdom is real, and all of this is just an illusion. And so he's just going around, wake up, stop this, because he knows that they can't touch him, because he can't be killed, so to speak.
So this is one of the mysteries for all of us, isn't it? That's like as we get deeper into this material, and how important our own thinking about life actually is really the foundation on which we stand. And then what used to be important in the outside world, it's not saying it's not important, but it becomes secondary. And to see the rest of the world so like still up on the surface where you were before is you begin to really understand at a far deeper level that yes, it is now becoming Maya for me, but it's not. It's still reality for so many other people.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you can see the cynic in the bath, naked or whatever. It goes, I just don't give a crap about this. Actually, you can threaten that you're going to take my barrel away, but I don't care.
Yeah.
And so the powers that be just don't have any purchase on you. And that is so freeing, isn't it? It's just stuff. And I think that's why, this whole concept of pilgrimage and being peripatetic, like not like Jesus doesn't live anywhere. He is like almost like a cynic. And it's like, well, what can you do?
Yeah.
You can't take anything off me. And I can see, like, with this whole kind of Schwab type thing, sort of hitting on that theme of you can take someone right down, and then they go, actually, you've taken everything off me, and do you know what? I am happy. Thanks.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked because I've found that because of what you've done, I've actually found this internality, this fountain of the infinite. So I don't need this anymore. Thanks. Yeah. One of the things as well that struck me about this is the soul goes away. So the soul wakes up and just goes, stuff you. Like, I don't need this desire. Like, it's just irrelevant to me now. Like, I've woken up, I've transformed. You're in a different realm that really is just like a computer game to me. I'm just going to switch my computer off and go. And it's rejoicing. And that sort of really brought to mind Blake again, and Vernon sort of talks about the opposites that need to be together. So like the Lucifer, the Araman, or whatever. And he talks about reason, constraint, and rule. and energy, activity, and delight.
Aaron and Lucifer.
And they've got to be together.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's actually in the togetherness that a third entity is formed or comes in, or a transformation takes place. And just where I saw soul rejoicing, it just made me think about energy, activity, delight. It's like, yes, you know, I've actually switched something and oriented it, and this joy is coming out of that.
However,
what used to be a prison no longer is.
However, you can see the temptation here that's possible, right? You've freed yourself from this gaslighting egoist who wishes for you to stay at who knows his own lane and knows his own weaknesses and exploits those of others, the insecurities, the shame, all of it, right? And so you overcome it, and then oh well, look at me, then you become Luciferic, right? So it's important that they're together, but it's important that they're separate, that they need to be maintained. I would say that which is arising in between needs to strengthen in its arising in between. And so I just a warning there, you know. We can the levity that one feels when one passes this test can give you a false sense of your own capabilities, and the blithe one will come back through the other door, because the blithe one doesn't give a shit if you won or lost, because the blithe one just keeps going and going and going. It will meet you another day, especially if you go Luciferic, because then you're vulnerable, right?
And the Iroquois myth actually says that the two brothers are on either side of a river.
Yeah, that's right.
And they should never blend.
Yes.
And that even though there's two brothers in it, it's the second brother is actually non-dual, so contains or it could even be more than non-dual, I'm not sure, but it's actually a third capacity that looks at the two and makes sure, pays attention. It's like a third sort of thing. So it's having the river between, but also paying attention to the balance, making sure that's there, is in that myth. And you're right, not blending. Not blending. So we might just go to the next slide. Here we go. And so the third power, which is ignorance, and I think what we were saying before is this really sort of maps with that more Aramanic type of essence, and essentially ignorance is where you actually are given information, but in order to maintain your beliefs, you decide not to take it on board. So you can sort of see, you know, the darkness, then the desire, and then the ignorance. It's sort of getting worse and worse. And again,
desire is a fleeting. Ignorance, it's not permanent, but it's certainly a lot longer lasting than a fleeting desire.
Well, yeah. So what I'm sort of feeling from this, Angus, is that there's darkness, and then you decide what you're going to go for. So I'm gonna be a CEO or whatever, and I'm going to go for these desires, and then reality sends messages through to you going, this ain't working, like the cosmos doesn't like this. You know, it could be your conscience, it could be feedback from your mother that goes, you turn into a horrible being, I don't love you anymore, or your staff will quit or whatever. So there's like these messengers from God going, you're making the wrong choices here. And you're like, no, I'm going to be CEO, I'm going to be whatever. And so that's the ignorance part. it's like reality's come in and said, no, come on, you need to change your desire. And you say, no, I'm staying. I'm sticking with this one, regardless of what the world thinks. That's kind of the picture that I build from this.
It's also that which permanentizes the desire as as fetish, say, or diminishes the power of the desire that is the impulse for love and goodness, and makes that a permanent, a permanently diminishing return. And then becomes a fetish loop between rationalization of getting everything you want, because that's the way the world works. And so permanentizing the ignorance becomes it's not just one ignorance, and it's not just a temporary ignorance because you don't know any better. It's doubling down on your behaviors because you're able to only think rationally. So I think of the result of empiricism here, right? Because empiricism only allows for you to think rationally, and rational thinking is a useful tool, but it, by the very nature of its rationing, it separates everything, and so there is no patterned connection. There's only you, and if you don't believe that, you're an idiot, right? Because then you're just pie in the sky, philosophizing in thin air. It's all sentimental nonsense, right? And so it's power grabbing is the only way to go. So then here's the temptation, right? You can see these as temptations, not just like admonishments, like trying to get into the weakness, the in wickedness you are bound, like, right? Because in wickedness the speaker is bound, because wickedness is the way that we do things. Don't you know that, you fool? You're bound there. So don't judge me, right? And the soul's like, I didn't judge you. I'm free of that judgment. You're the one that's doing the judging, right?
Yeah. And I see, like, from you talking there as well, Jeff, like how ignorance is systematized. So we will start to create frameworks that make rationality the way, the only way, the right way. And it's doubling down, using technologies basically to maintain this illusion, creating more policies, when things aren't working. We also, like, I'm just thinking about, like, in the royal commissions, and it might be that Aramanic type of essence that it's really strong in our world today, is that demonizing of conduct and culture. So the energy, activity, delight is actually called out as being the reason for corruption. Ironically,
yeah, you're not corrupt enough, right? You're having too much fun. You're just too much levity, because love looks like egoism to the egoist, right?
Well, it's the human element, right? So Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, he thought it was great that Baal was up there trying to kill the snake, and that was how we create stability and peace, was to kill the dynamic. And so we're totally indoctrinated. So if something goes wrong, we think it must be human, but we don't realize it's actually too much system and not enough human. That imbalance is what's causing the serpent.
Right. Or there's too many humans, and if
Yeah,
it was only
yeah,
just
yeah.
me and my elite friends who know better, and then, but also, by
We
the
need
way,
more controls.
who've learned how to do more control, also, who are very good at what they do as possessed beings, you could say.
Yeah, that lack. So ignorance means lack of, it's not knowing, and it's like, and you sort of feel like that knowing is actually the consciousness. type of knowing,
It's
and you're just trying to stop it from coming
and
in.
at the point of this rationalization, systematic rationalization, it's ignoring knowing. it's
Totally.
right. So it's not just
And
it's not as I was saying, it's willful ignorance, and it promotes ignorance as a way to keep its position. Say its jab, as George Carlin says.
And that antichrist type of essence, you can see that in like the scientist, the pharmacologist, that sort of that complement. So it's the human kind of the center element that
It's so ironic, isn't
comes
it,
in.
that a belief in human wickedness results in human wickedness, right? It's really like if you can get somebody to believe that they're wicked, they'll react to you in the way that you prophesied they would.
Exactly. Yeah. And
It's why gaslighting works. This is what this power is doing. It's just gaslighting at a different level now.
yeah. So in A Marriage of Heaven and Hell, Blake says prisons are built with stones of law, brothels are built with bricks of religion. So that's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, well, it's that fetish too, right? So we're a puritanical ideological culture that is obsessed with pornography, right, and witch
So
burning.
one of the things that I saw in this actually, so I wrote a poem about a particular situation that I found myself in, where I said to somebody, I don't want to be controlled. And then they said that the fact that I didn't want to be controlled was actually controlling them. And I just was really, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And I was really trying to ponder with the metaphysics of the paradox and say, how can me not wanting to be controlled actually be controlling them? And then I realized it was because I was in a different realm. I was in the whole, and this person was in the finite. And so from a whole perspective, I wanted to be free. But from a finite perspective, my freedom was actually controlling them. So, and I saw an element of that in what this power is saying to soul. It's saying, don't judge me. And judge here means krisen. It means to cut apart, yeah, to judge. And so soul is saying, I don't want to be part of you. I'm going to cut myself away from you because I'm in this different realm. I'm not here anymore. And this power can only see that soul is judging, and is accusing soul of judging. And soul's like, I'm not judging. I just don't want to be part of this game. And so I really saw that my poem was sort of touching on what was going on here with the accusations, that this power actually does really think that soul is judging from its standpoint.
Again, I'd like to bring in the temptation problem of then becoming too aloof, which is what the Luciferic response would be. Like, yeah, I didn't judge you. I'm better than that, right? I don't judge. I'm not judgy, right? And the first step was necessary for this step, because the soul already said, I'm not bound to your shame of desire, right? I've rejoiced beyond that, and so I'm not susceptible to your gaslighting on this judging issue. Sure, I judge. I'm a human being. I can't do anything without making judgments, but I'm not bound to judgment as a wickedness, like, right?
No, I see what you're saying. And maybe it's that Hegelian thing again of the antithesis and then the synthesis. It's like I'm pulling myself away and then I'm going to reorder myself and rebalance.
Yes, I guess the thought that inspired that was, this is an enemy, and the way through this very difficult, by the way, moment, when you're confronted with somebody who is gaslighting you in this way, is to love thine enemy. It's the only way through it. And to become aloof is to make oneself vulnerable to again being disconnected from a reality that will allow this being to enter another door.
Can I say though that I actually think that I've been sort of communing with Mercy a lot in the last sort of few days, and I actually see that this poem and perhaps what Soul's doing is not so much being aloof, but more of an understanding. So it's looking at the whole picture and understanding the power's affliction and being quite merciful and saying, I understand where you're coming from, and I see the logic there, and this is really where I am.
Yeah, isn't understanding,
and there's no judgment.
Isn't understanding well, spiritual understanding is healthy. And again, this is where health comes from. But it isn't understanding a step in the process of coming to love. So if you love thine enemy, you've redeemed the enemy in a sense. So
Yeah.
if understanding is a step, then compassion is another step, the Buddhist path, and then the Christ path is love. And you can't get there without understanding, and so then compassion. It's, what do they say? If to know somebody's story is to love them, if you truly know their story. And that's a challenge I'm going to give myself.
That's right. The other interesting thing is that the soul doesn't seem to redeem these powers. It just moves on. Maybe it's the moving on that makes the power have cognitive dissonance. They say, hold on a minute, and it starts them on their transformation. I'm not sure.
I think just on that point there, because my thinking was already going in that direction anyway. This is this problem of how do we confront evil, and sometimes it's by just not engaging with it. And there's a couple of ways of thinking about this from my perspective. You've obviously got the forgiveness angle, but what does forgive mean? It means not holding a grudge against somebody, not continually repeating these negative thoughts that you have about somebody. And this is really the Russian word, I did used to know it, but I can't, for forgiveness is to simplify. Простить, I think it's simple, and it's anyway, I won't make up words because I can't remember them anymore. But forgiveness in Russian, it means its etymological roots have become to simplify life. So if I stop holding grudges against people who have done me wrong, that is actually part of cleansing my own inner life, my own thought life, my own feeling life, and obviously consequently therefore my own will life, because if I'm not thinking and processing it in my thinking, then I'm not going to be trying to do things like take revenge or something like that. And then the other picture that I was being reminded of, this picture also happens to be related to Russia. That I remember reading a book by Prokofiev, and I think it was called The Occult Significance of Forgiveness. And so one of the concrete examples that he gives from history there is how the Christians of Russia, when Stalin came in and was like it's like driving, it's like the morality, it's like the ethics out of Russia. It's like the Christianization out of Russia. That their response was to flow out into the vast spaces of the taiga and Siberia, where Stalin couldn't get at them anymore. So it was rather than a confronting and battling with it. I'll give another example in a second. But rather than confronting and battling with it, you just say, okay, you live in your world. I don't want to live in your world, and I'm going to sort of withdraw from your sphere of influence. And I might be repeating something that I've said before here, but it's not going to surprise you in the slightest when I say it. It is one of these experiences that the madness of the COVID and everything over the last couple of years. It's really driven home to us the point of if somebody's made up their mind, it doesn't matter how many scientific studies, it doesn't matter how much you try to reason to let's try and take a balanced look at it. No, they do not want to change their mind, and you can choose whether to complete continue to waste your energy, trying to argue against them and raise the point and to keep on arguing. But instead of actually moving forward, it actually only sours, or it's it intensifies the problem. So you have to, if it's a relationship that you value, then you need to drop it and just respect. Okay, they've made their decisions. I will never be on board with the decisions that they've made and the reasoning behind it, but that person is still important, valuable to me. I love that person, and yeah, I don't need to destroy that relationship any further by keep on talking about it, because they've made their decisions. They are free individual beings, and despite the fact that I might be convinced that they've made the wrong decisions based on lies and propaganda, that's the reality on the ground.
Can I remind us of the directionality here? That this is a description. Also, this is this beautifully said. I was thinking Prokofiev as soon as you brought up the Russian word. That book is wonderful. The occult significance of forgiveness. And I wanted to say that this is a post-resurrection. This is a post-death description of a travel, of a process that the Christ went through. Am I correct in that? Is that right?
Yeah.
So
that's right.
He descended into darkness. And then after descending into darkness, started to move back up. And it says here, I was not recognized. I'm sorry. When the soul had overcome the third power, it went upward and saw the fourth power, which took 7 forms. So you're coming out of the dark physiology, the dark matter where you descended into, and through the redemption of desire, the redemption of ignorance, and the redemption now of death, we're moving into life. So the 7 life, he's moving into the life processes now, and this life processes are take a as a fourth power, take a 7-foldness to them, right? And so we're going to redeem this 7-step process of redemption of the life processes that Christ entered in order to redeem human beings who are becoming too bound in their life processes to matter ignorantly, and desires taking over as a sort of rational fetish loop that we were describing earlier. So it's really showing the way.
And I'm just thinking about the forgiveness and the redemption there. It's a little bit cryptic, but in that verse 17 there, it says, I have recognized the oil is being dissolved. And to me, this really talks about Mother Mind coming in and taking the things that are recognized as not actually being aligned with consciousness and dissolving them back into the root. And here I'm really feeling that these particular powers and principalities, she's actually now grabbed them and she's pulled, because soul has helped distinguish them and is pulling them out. So they're not there anymore. And so soul is kind of, it's like a computer game. It's like bing, 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 and they're dissolving, and then it's the next one. But these are actually gone now. They've gone back into the root. They were adulterated, and she's recognized them and brought them back out. So she's cleansed Mother Mind, the space.
It's like a moral,
so that potentially interpretation.
Our moral evolution. We were talking about it yesterday in the video, but that's like the purifying of the self, of that which weighs us down, that which binds our soul, where we no longer want to be bound. We feel that weight, and how it impacts negatively on our environment, or ourselves. And we decide we no longer want to bear that weight, and we try to make the appropriate changes in our life, and how we think about things and the feelings that arise.
I'd like to bring in something here too, because I was seeing this. I kept thinking about just over the last hour that I kept thinking, well, these are temptations as well, right? And then I was thinking of the temptations, and the Luciferic temptations, and then the Aramonic temptations. This, as Steiner describes it specifically, I'm not sure that other biblical scholars have done their homework on the polarity of evil. But there's a point at which Ahriman says to Lucifer, "Get out of here, man. your lower self desires to, you're just not effective with this dude, man. Here's how you do it." And he says, "Turn bread into stone. I mean, turn stone into bread." And it's like, man does not live by bread alone. Well, that's a nice pithy answer there, but it's not enough, because Ahriman says it's not enough because you have never made food, right? You've never worked with the soil. You've never done things that people have to do to toil away their lives just to make life work, right? And so Christ goes away, and it's not resolved. The Aramonic is not redeemed in that, right? It's said in Steinerian terms that Lucifer was redeemed at that point. It doesn't mean it's a permanent redemption. It just means that something has been overcome for humanity, say, and it's available for you also to overcome it. But Ahriman was not overcome in that moment. It was a good answer, but it was a bookmark for what was to come. And so, what is the resurrection but turning stone into bread? And now, who's the bread of life, right? And so, but it's not a given. It has to be taken up, of course. But this is what I was thinking about. This is why I was thinking about the temptations, because it's a recapitulation, and then the achievement of overcoming that last temptation, say.
I also see as well, Jeff, that the fourth power, death, is using these other mechanics or techniques, technologies, in order to achieve what it needs to do. And I see that with Ahriman saying to Jesus, "Do this now, like turn the stone into bread." that he is actually commanding that as like a trick or something, as magic. And Jesus like, no. And then Jesus actually then, like you said, goes and does it, but not mediated through death, but actually not on command. He's actually doing it in his own time and in the right way, the kairos, the right time. And so I see with this fourth power that it's instrumentalizing these technologies, and Jesus was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
it's actually
yeah.
It's actually a separate, it's separate. I'm not going to blend my magic with you, thank you very much. Yeah. So I think let's go on to those 7 forms, those 7 wraths.
This will only take a couple of hours.
I know, we've got to get through this.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is where we plan to start today.
Yes. For me, the wraths are technologies, and I really see this as an evolution of technocracy. I really see that wrathful wisdom is kind of where we're at right now, which is we're going to use science, we're going to use all of this, the stuff that we know, but we're going to use it because we're really pissed off with the world, and we want to twist the world like we're twisted. I think as well the word wrath actually does mean a twisting. I'm twisted in rage, or it's got that sort of twisting type of construct to it, which I think is quite interesting. And Soul actually says at the end as well, it says, what binds me has been slain, and what turns me has been overcome. And so to me as well, I think these wraths, that the previous powers were about binding, and Soul just says, no, I'm cutting myself off these, whereas this is about twisting. It's slightly different, I think, and that there's a different mechanism or different way that Soul needs to deal with twisting rather than binding. So I didn't know if that, when you'd read about these wraths, if you'd actually thought about that difference and the sort of the technology kind of aspect behind them.
Because you're talking about twisting and turning, is that make straight the road of what's the rest of that, John? Anybody recognize it? Make straight. This idea of straightening out is like a corrective action, and it's in John, isn't it? Is it? Either of you recognize it? Make straight the path of the Lord for the. How does that go? Make straight the path of the Lord. And it's before the baptism of Christ. You got to. I'll just find it. Because he's quoting Isaiah the prophet, and he says, make straight the way of the Lord. And oh no, that's just it. I thought there was another bit. Sorry, it was your focus on the word twisting, and how immediately before the baptism, John is saying do the opposite, so like don't make twisted, make straight.
Yeah. And that sort of eris, the sort of the strife, the snakes twist that. So I've got the picture of Baal and Leviathan there. This sort of twisting element. And if we also talk about the story of where we've come to so far. So we've had the darkness, we've had the desire, we've ignored the signs and tried to systematize our beliefs. And this is really where things start to turn and go, the pressure's starting to build. And it could be the pressure in that individual person as well, that, I've tried to control these people and this and that, but I just want them. I just hate myself. I hate them. It's that nihilistic kind of, I just want it all dead.
It's the Nietzschean idea of resentment. So I think of those terms, bind and turn, which is from the previous overcoming, say, in being bound to desire and being turned toward ignorance, because you have to convince people to be ignorant in a certain sense, right? So that's why this is really important, because that's why there's a whole propaganda machine that's been cultivated since the early 1900s and has been is an all-out information war on individuals. So then we have okay, so I just leave that behind, because the Christ overcomes the turning, so there's no convincing, like this bread and stone thing, that I'm not buying it, and here's how you do it, but I had to do it myself. I couldn't just be performative with you. And then the wrath, I think of the twisted souls of resentment that have no way of overcoming that. So the way of overcoming it is through this being that's showing us the way to overcome that, right? So the death of God is now the rebirth of God, and it's the death of God that caused the resentment, right? That's why Nietzsche was the definer of resentment. Nobody defined resentment better than Nietzsche did. And resentment is the thing that twists us. It's more than bound. It's twisted. That's what we speak of as evil in our contemporary culture. People who are twisted, they've embraced their resentment to such a degree that they enjoy it, but they don't, or they're self-righteous about it, which is an extra bit of twisted, in my opinion. So you could say it's a twisting together of the polarities too, that where they need to be freed from each other, not entwined with each other.
Isn't it fascinating how this word twisted? So if you just think about twisting a garment to make it stronger, it's like it has this. You can have this positive, it's like in a physical sense, like connotations. But when you're talking about the inner life, it's never positive. Isn't it funny? Because we've obviously got this somehow, this blending, this twisting, this action somehow intuitively just feels anti-human. It's weird, isn't it? Why? How can twisting feel? Let's forget the rationale. We just feel how, no, that's unhealthy.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just thinking as well about twisting as in a tapestry. Like, again, I mean, there's Mary, untier of knots, but then there's also the divine feminine of the twisting. And we were talking, about the Antichrist before, and I see in this real clever twisting of the Luciferic and the Aramanic together to create new forms of that are blended, like a chimera almost, like beasts that have got leopard heads and this and that and this. It's that sort of twist plaiting of all of these evil essences together. and so they're married in all these kind of weird ways.
One wonders.
The opposite would be harmony, wouldn't it? Harmony is never a bad thing. That is also it's a twisting, but it's not twisting. It's good twisting.
It's weaving.
Yeah.
Right. So I was thinking two things, but let me go with this last thing. That Waldorf education in the early years is meant to, and I would love to hear what Ian McGilchrist has to say about this, is the weaving together of the hemispheres, and inviting in the uprightness through crossing the meridian, say crossing the center line, and so they're doing handwork, and they do eurythmy gestures that bring the two things together, that bring the two aspects together, but in a creative and weaving way, not in a not in a involuntarily knotted up way, right? The whole idea is to tie knots and then undo the knot, tie the knot and undo the knot. You tie your shoes in a bow. You don't tie your shoes in a knot. Only a twisted person would tie somebody's shoes in a knot and then tie them together, probably, right? So I was thinking of that the cure is the weaving, and I was also thinking then, are these 7 powers the Azuras? Has that answered that question to some extent? Because there's in a sense we can work with Lucifer and Ahriman, but these 7 powers are in a sense, sorry, is out of our reach, but not out of Christ's reach here, because he's coming into terms with these 7 powers. Maybe this is the process that we're involved in now.
Yeah. It seems to me that is the case. I'm just trying to. So if we were to go to verse 20, so this is the Wraths now speaking. Wraths, I keep on pronouncing it incorrectly. They asked the soul, whence do you come, slayer of men? Or where are you going, conqueror of space? So
wow.
So slayer of men, the interpretation that I have been reading is really talking about slayer of them. So they see themselves as men, these different wraths. And soul is slaying them. And conqueror of space is referring to Mother Mind, and basically getting rid of all of this stuff so that Mother Mind is clear again.
What?
And
go ahead.
And sorry, and just the final thing was that it's that soul was a slave to these things, and soul in the slaying, in the space clearing, becomes its own master.
Yes, and the temptation is another temptation here, because, hey, you overcame what it is to be merely human, right? You've overcome time and space. You slayed death, right? You are you're awesome. What are you going to do now, man? And the simple answer is, this is what I've done. This is what I've done so far. What's ahead is what's ahead. Job's not done. I've only overcome being bound to desire and being convinced to be stupid. But how do I go forward from here?
So, if I understood you, Jeff, you're emphasizing the fact that the soul in 21 is like saying, what you say is true for the moment, but I recognize that there may be other things to slay, and there may be other things that I have to overcome. Am I understanding you correctly there?
Yeah, I mean, he's referring to the past. Yeah, that happened.
Exactly.
That's correct. That happened. Thank you for sharing. Now let's move on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then verse 22, I think this is obviously it sticks out for me, is these are the two that we've been entertaining the idea of, that this is Lucifer and Ahriman. My desire has ended, my ignorance has died. So, and these are the means by which the Azuras can enter into our being. But if they have been, to the extent that they are conquered, the Azuras have no purchase. The Wraths have no place in us, and in that sense, those are the two forces that we have to battle with. We have the Christ impulse has to live ever more strongly in us to ensure a healthy balance between those two.
Yeah, and I'd like to pick that up because and my desire has ended and my ignorance has died. How do you pronounce that? Eon or ion?
Eon, yeah.
Okay, so it's just spelled as it should be, I suppose. I was released from a world, and in a type from a type, from the fetter of oblivion, which is transient. And in the philosophy of freedom, we're just dealing with the way in which freedom turns in a moral imagination and moral technique and moral intuition. Becoming more fully human is a speciation process. So as a species, that's how you find your universality. So the individualization has occurred through this resurrection right down into the physical body, and now is reawakened in the etheric, say the seven life processes, as humanity right now is twisted right down into the seven life processes. And this is the savior moment. And I was really interested in this last line, which is, from this time on, I will attain to the rest of time, of the season, of the ion, in silence. Isn't this interesting? What does that mean? The rest of time, of the season, of the eon, in silence.
The Gnostics, they have, is it like 31 eons that they talk about? Because it's like their own time system, isn't it? I think it's, I don't know enough about it more than to compare it to the different ages that you can read about in Oriental philosophy, the Kali Yuga, the Krita Yuga, and that type of thing. But it's technical language in the same sense that we've got lots of technical terms like epochs and periods in the world of anthroposophy.
Right. I don't mean, what do we mean by the words? I mean, what do we mean by the sentence? Because if you have, I will attain to the rest of time, of the season. So that's a temporary rest of time, or time will be over and a new season will arise that's not bound to time or something, right? And that this eon is the season that I'm going to spend the rest of time in silence, right? So then what is this silence, right? This is the Christ speaking after the resurrection, already now as an experience up into his into life again, into the light of day, so to speak, back in time, right?
Just going to read you somebody else's rendering of it, the exact same one that we're looking at. From this moment onward now, and for all seasons, I am released into silent restfulness, where time rests in the eternity of time. And that has a very different flavor about it, doesn't it?
It's a spice different, but I don't see it as deeply meaningfully different.
For me, it's entering into this contemplative state where time doesn't exist, where time rests in the eternity of time. It's like moving into a timeless state is what I'm getting from that I'm not getting from the particular rendering we're looking at here.
Yeah,
I sense more confusion coming from this than when I read the one that I just read.
I see. I guess I wasn't very clear because I was trying to work through it as I was talking. The silence was the thing that I was left with the question, but the other elements say what you just said about time and about eternity, and but the silence is a really interesting because what is our relationship with the Christ that sits now in silence for the rest of time as we know it, as time, this season where time is the factor? What's the role of Christ as a silent being? That's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that develops.
The eternal inspirer of ever more noble moral actions.
Inspiration.
And the thing as well about like McGill-Chris talks about it is about sound as being the start of the cosmos and of consciousness. And in the beginning there was the word, and then this is actually almost the antithesis of that. It's like there's no word, there's no sound. So what does that mean? He's there, soul is there, but there's no logos, there's no sound.
Well, the word became flesh. The flesh was crucified. The crucifixion was a resurrection. The word is in a sense complete. Maybe the new logos is the music of silence or something like that. It goes to that's a fanciful way to describe it, perhaps. But if you think about Steiner describes life after death as a process that one goes through. First, you go through a life review, and then you enter into the realm of kamaloka, which is an experience of living your life as if from the other person's point of view. It's just one part of it, but that's one. Like you did harm to somebody, not only do you feel the harm you did to them, you feel it from their perspective, right? So you go through this process, right? And then that's a kind of hell in a way, you could say, particularly if you were not if you were an egoist. No wonder that egoists want to be transhuman so they don't have to go through that, because they must have some memory of that, right? But so anyway, you go through that, and then there's the next realm is the devaconic. Is that how you pronounce that, Angus? Devaconic.
I think
it's the devaconic
I'm not
is
sure. Anyway,
the realm out of which music arises. Right? It's the realm that called us forth in a certain sense musically, and so it's like the Christ has moved in a 3-day period up into the devaconic, and is part of the music of the spheres again, and out of silence comes inspiration. Say, Steiner also talks about the initiation process as when imagination is gained and you overcome it. You've probably heard me describe this before. That you just quiet the images, and then arises pure inspiration, and he compares it to music, but it's actually silence. It's silence that is the inspiration. It's pure silence is pure information in that case. That might be helpful.
I'm going to give a, so, as you were describing that, Jeff, I was thinking about this logos. Just when we talk, I mean, just the fact that we can talk. Like, so that sentence that I just said, I had no idea that I was going to say it until it's like passed over my lips. So it was there somewhere existing in me. And this is true of all the sentences that we ever say. They come into being out of nowhere. We can explain, we know why they come into being, but not the how and from whence they come. We know they come from within us. And I want to connect that to his three like higher states of consciousness. We've got the imaginative, but Jeff was talking about the inspirative, which is where beings start to talk out of themselves about their own essence. But and in that sense, although it's a silent communication, it's like to us in the outside world, we can still internally hear it as voices or sound, as in like harmony of the spheres and that type of thing. I think, I don't know, I haven't had any direct conscious experience of it. But then I asked myself the question, okay, so what's this intuitive consciousness that Steiner talks about? And that's a completely silent one. It's not somebody, it's not another being, another essence to me, revealing to me. Instead, it is me living within that being and directly experiencing what that being it is out of its own inner necessity, out of its own lawfulness. And this is one of the areas where I haven't read anything to support this idea, but I'm wondering, is there, so like in the beginning was the Word and the Word was with God. It's a little bit, it's like, okay, where do my words come from? They come from sort of like an invisible will force. I'm thinking about Schopenhauer, and you can probably understand why, Jeff, can't you? But it's like got a Schopenhauerian feel about it. And is that in there as well? So like something even more invisible, something pre-logos, because in Christianity you've got the Trinity, you've got the silent eternal Godhead who sends out his Son, and then the Holy Spirit. So you've got that Trinity going on there, but this mystery of what this Godhead is has like it's got this will aspect, in the sense that it's silent, it's mysterious, it's invisible to it. It is so invisible that it doesn't even it doesn't communicate itself through words. I don't know. I'm not sure how to like develop that thread. But I find it very tricky to. These are realms that we've got eons to select to learn to understand a little bit better what they're all about. But you've got to start somewhere with questions.
So one of the things that sort of struck me with this is the mother mind is the spiritual realm, and then there's something behind mother mind. So occasionally in this story, things just pop in, and it's like, well, where are they from? Like, but it's all that actually is silent. The story is silent on that. There is something beyond spiritual, the spiritual realm, and it's the ineffable. It's almost that which cannot be talked about, sort of thing. And so it could potentially be that that it is something behind. And when in the first bit of the gospel where it says matter will be destroyed. I had this kind of intuition from that what it was trying to say is that particular iteration of spirit, the spiritual realm, was actually going to we're coming into a different spiritual realm, and that one is actually going to be destroyed, dissolve, and exactly the whole realm is going to dissolve, and what lies behind it has already got a new realm ready for us, a new home, a new spiritual home. That could be, it could very well be that Christ is now behind and waiting to create a new home with new challenges, because these challenges are very much about the individual soul, but now I think the challenges that we face, we need a new testament because they are so systemic, and it's going to have to be a story about how our souls reciprocally participate, I think. Whereas this is very much in Barfield's term, I think this is very much the withdrawal phase. It's the single soul, the hero's journey, that sort of thing. Whereas this new type of consciousness is going to be reciprocal. So we need new myths, we need new mother minds where we all join in. And collectively, our souls will need to weave new tapestries, I think. Because there are potentially this wrath, this twisting. There's these new inverted, subverted, just so unbelievably complex types of energies that are sort of evil. We all need to go in and actually surround it and say, this is the new picture of what this looks like.
I think in that vein, it's really significant that and I've wondered about this for weeks now, that he's referring to the soul through this process. The soul answered. The soul rejoiced. The soul rose. That sort of picture, and what the process we're in, I would say, is spiritualizing the soul. What he's describing is that all things dissolve. Oneness is what takes their place, not all things, but allness, say, or something like that. And then you have the soul joining the spirit as one in the end in silence, right? So we haven't spiritualized our soul yet. We're twisted, but the way forward is the spiritualization of our souls. That is, it will become reciprocal, but only through the spiritualization of the soul, so that the spiritualization of the body can occur, so that we can go through our own overcoming of the transient oblivion, as he says in the previous, the following but previous slide.
So I just thought we might sort of close on, what's really happened in our world spiritually and soulfully since this Gospel of Mary. And I really see, and as Steiner said, the advent of the technocracy. And so this is why I've sort of put all of these pictures in this slide. And really showing sort of the similarities between them. So we've got Mary with the veil of mercy, and you can see that she has a lot of souls there. So she's joining all the souls together and connecting them almost together. such that they can all together go out into the world and spread mercy. So there's that kind of network soul type model with the divine feminine type of governance. And then really what we have right now is this like Leviathan type. So this king, this is the frontispiece of Thomas Hobbes's book Leviathan. You can see potentially that his body is created with lots of faces. And so he is the mediator, the technocracy is the mediator between us and the divine. And you can sort of see that they're kind of similar, but one of them's quite macabre in a way. And then I've got the kind of the screaming sort of soul faces sort of thing, which I think is kind of where we're at now, is the souls are sort of, there's so much PTSD going around that I think that the souls are getting to the stage where they will be permanently destroyed, if not injured, that they're sort of stuck in this wall of souls. I wouldn't even call it a purgatory. It's something way worse than that. And I think that this is where we're going to, particularly, you know, with the AI, the jabs and all the rest of it, is that our souls are now stuck and damaged. And it's a collective issue now. And they're damaged by forces that are so twisted that no matter how much Mary unties those knots, it is literally Play-Doh that's been squished around till it's all brown. There's no way back. So this might be why Christ is in the background going, hey, we're going to need a new mother mind here. Version 1.0 is just not going to sort out this whole technocratical quagmire.
Yeah, I think that's a good description of the temporal place that we're in at this point, and the resurrection is real. So we're not talking about a story that is a mythological construct that is meant to be a useful way to think about ways to even develop one's own autonomy, but an actual act that is alive in the earth and is linked with the karma of every single individual. And there's going to be misery. In any case, there's going to be misery, but there's going to be misery self-caused. And the reason why Steiner brought this is the perhaps the what you reap when you ask a couple of anthroposophists to bring Steinerian thought into the room, but the idea that this was necessary to some extent, but then Steiner understood in sort of Christ-like fashion, you could say, that this is a race, and people are going to be waking up and taking hold of their spiritual autonomy, and there's a great sort of cleave happening where people are deciding to give themselves over to this boundness, this twistedness, and this self-convincing ignorance as the total human experience. But then there is the obviousness for people who've held on to their humanity, that this next phase is a communal phase, and that the collective group thing is just a symptom of the desire that is at root, which is the ground of being is love, and love seeks to implement itself in the world, and so to bear fruit for what it is to be Christ-like, say. And what this gospel says to me is, here's how you do it, right? And it does it better than anything I've read from a religious document. And I really appreciate you bringing this to us.
I think it's almost time for a Gospel Mark II. For those who manage to birth themselves out of the quagmire, even from that sort of simplistic, like that, it's a simple story of the soul being bound and so forth. But this, I think, this next phase is a lot more complex. So we need to work through this first, and then work through, Mary Mark II second. And Lord knows what that's going to look like. Hope someone's writing it.
Have we outlined what the 7 powers of wrath are? Did we? We didn't do that, did we?
No. Essentially, though, Jeff, I think you sort of highlighted that they are the equivalent of the 7 spirits of God or the powers of peace. They're just the twisted, they're the opposite, basically, of those. The spirit of knowledge, light, the spirit of counsel, righteous desire, the spirit of wisdom, knowledge, spirit of Yahweh, excitement of life, spirit of understanding, the kingdom of spirit, spirit of strength, which is prudent wisdom of the flesh, and fear of the Lord, which is peaceful wisdom. So those are the 7 powers of peace, the powers of God, and these are the opposite.
So are the 7 powers of wrath mentioned in this? I don't remember.
Yep.
They are.
Yeah. So
what are they?
The slide that I've got up now. Yeah. The wrath is darkness, desire, ignorance, excitement of death, kingdom of the flesh, foolish wisdom of the flesh. Yeah. And they're very, as I sort of commune with these, I saw them as being very sort of technocratic.
Yes, my homework will be to research, because I think this speaks of the Christ event after, during and after the resurrection. To see where in my psychophysiological and spiritual framework this is existentially real, and I'm being pointed to the 7 life processes as a once the soul is transformed, the way in which this overcoming of the way in which we are all twisted. I would say that this is the karma of the world right now, that we're all twisted, and that the transformation of the soul into the transformation of the 7 life processes as a spiritually autonomous capacity. And we're in the heart phase, I would say, pulling the essential from the inessential, getting rid of the inessential, and staying with the essence of things. And the way up the life processes is to take over the reproductive processes. In other words, the wisdom of creation being something that we're able to achieve as Christ did, in real terms, like no joke, And it starts with the resurrection at the level of brain-bound thinking, which is the in Philosophy of Freedom, in this last chapter 12, he describes twice the way in which the thinking enters, represses the psychophysiological organization, and replaces it with itself. And that's step 1. That's where we are right now, I think, is epistemologically speaking. That can be that sort of language can be very apparent alongside of this profoundly esoteric reality that we've just wrestled with.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about vessels and spaces and so forth, and aporia as being and those sort of vessels of mercy. One of the preconditions of that is unthinking. It's actually winding back from what you thought was real, and potentially having some sort of angel in there that's creating the vortex. We talked about that last week. So it's creating that white noise or whatever it is, a vessel. I just lost my train of thought there, but yeah. So about just winding everything back to as being as silent as we can be. And it's mercy that does that. It's the divine feminine.
Shall we?
So maybe she's making her come back.
As Kate mentioned yesterday, she's never left. We are, our heritage, our nature is already there. It's already there to work with. It would be ignorance to believe the deceiver that it's not. So that's what the word anthroposophy really means, is an indwelling wisdom. So it's there. It's not the twisted wisdom. It's the twisted sister of wisdom, I'd say.
Okay. Is it time to wrap up 2.5 hours later? Okay.
I think so.
Okay, I'll just press